These 6 tales are entitled A Horrific Compilation. These stories were written by Chronic Nightmares. The author can be found on reddit.com and will be linked in the description of this video. Warning: some of these stories include graphic content not suitable for all. Listening discretion is advised. Tragedy. My sister Taylor died in a horrible accident. I'll never forget my mother's face when she saw her bare, blood-stained feet that still twitched as they protruded from beneath the lawnmower. She had been playing under the heat of the sun in the back garden as Dad mowed the lawn. Dad looked away for a split second, and that was all it took. Taylor walked out in front of the lawnmower, and he couldn't stop it in time. Taylor was already dead beneath it. Blood began pooling out and seeping into the soil. Mom screamed and Dad dropped to his knees crying. Nobody called an ambulance. Nobody did anything. For 10 whole minutes it was just vacant stares before coming to their senses and seeing me staring wide-eyed at the bloody scene and sending me up to my room, telling me to stay there. My bedroom window gave me a good view of the back garden, so I watched my parents through the cracks of the blinds. Mom was crying as she held open a black bin bag for Dad, who was in the process of carefully pulling out parts of my sister and being even more gentle as he lowered them into the bag. It was 4 hours before they eventually got most of her out of the lawnmower. They both brought Taylor's remains inside, and 1 hour later, Dad came up to my room, looking pale and sickly. "Do not leave this bedroom, no matter what you hear," Dad said before shutting the door and going back downstairs. And later that night, I did hear weird things. At around 3 a.m., I heard my parents chanting something in unison, in words I could not understand. Then, the inhuman wails echoed from downstairs. Something evil was loose in our house. It was in the walls and in our minds, rummaging around the brain in search of our deepest fears. I never saw it, and its presence was undeniably felt, and it instilled upon me a blood-curdling terror of which I had never felt before. I covered my head with my pillow and laid for hours in my bed, wide-eyed, drenched in sweat, and cowering in fear. Everything had gone silent by the time the sun was beginning to creep in through the window. I hesitantly got out of bed, still shivering, and cautiously made my way downstairs. And halfway down the stairs, I noticed the familiar sound of something sizzling away on a frying pan, and the wonderful smell of bacon filled my nostrils. I walked into the kitchen and screamed. Taylor was sitting at the kitchen table next to Dad, all crudely sewn up and expressionless, chewing on a raw piece of bacon as she stared blankly through white glossy eyes. Mom smiled when she saw me.
"Taylor is all better now,"
Mom said, smiling as she flipped the bacon in the pan.
"Sit down next to your sister and have some breakfast."
Eye for an eye. I accidentally killed a woman and her 8-year-old daughter in a head-on collision while I was driving drunk. It wasn't until I sobered up that the full realization of what I did really kicked in. The fact that I had killed an innocent mother and her child so horribly didn't really sink into my intoxicated mind. I just remember staring blankly as a policeman spoke to me. I wished it was me who had died that day. I really do. It eats at me every day. Their faces are forever burned in my mind. My parents bribed the judge, without me knowing. I wanted to go to prison. I deserved to go to prison, but I had rich parents who just threw money at their problems. So I got away with it. Months passed by. My drinking became worse, and the mother and child now began appearing in my dreams, though I only saw them in their states after the crash. The mother's face was completely flattened due to the failure of her airbag to deploy. She was holding her headless daughter's hand as they both stood at the bottom of my bed watching me. Then I would wake up in a sweat. But it got worse from there. I went from seeing them in my dreams to seeing them in real life. Last night, as I was shaving in front of the bathroom mirror, I saw the flat-faced mother standing directly behind me, staring at me with a sinister look in her mangled eyes. The headless girl materialized next to her, holding her hand. Then I heard a childish giggle behind me, making me jump. I turned around as my heart beat like a drum inside my chest, and screamed when I saw them both standing in the doorway. I recoiled back as the mother pointed her bent finger at me.
You did this,
the mother said in a cold, icy tone.
Look what you did to me.
The headless girl said as she bowed her body, showing me the bloody stump of her neck, crawling with maggots.
I'm their food now.
I started throwing up and dropped to my knees. I'm so sorry, I said as I began to cry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen.
What did happen? You did this to us,
the mother said. She was right. I did do this to them. I'm the reason they were dead. How can I make this right? I asked, sobbing.
You know how to make this right,
the flat-faced woman replied.
Eye for an eye, life for a life.
As soon as I blinked, they were both gone. I know what has to be done now. How to make this right. The noose is ready, dangling above me as I write this, and I'm halfway through my bottle of whiskey. After this, I'm going to hang myself. Eye for an eye, life for a life. I watched the light leave their eyes. I have a deranged mind. I know this. How could I not? While other kids climbed trees or rode their bikes, I was using the hunting knife my dad brought me to see what the inside of cats look like. The answer? Wet, squishy, and warm. And yes, I did have a little taste. It wasn't very nice. Quite metallic, actually, like sucking on an old coin. One cat started squirming around, still alive as I was filling about inside its stomach. The agonized noises it made were soothing. And that look in its eyes, the look of betrayal, that is what really got me excited. That final stare, before life leaves the eyes completely, is priceless. But there are only so many cats and dogs you can kill before growing bored. So, by age, I believe 13 or was it 14? Anyway, doesn't matter. I started eyeing up a homeless man sleeping in an alleyway. Best thing about homeless people is they won't be missed. Easy prey. I waited until nightfall as he laid sleeping on his cardboard boxes in an alleyway that stunk of piss. I hovered over him as I fidgeted with the hunting knife in my hand. He was passed out drunk, and I could smell the whiskey on his heavy breath. I plunged the knife into his abdomen and sliced upwards, opening his stomach. I reached my hand inside and felt around the lovely warmth and wiggled my fingers around his guts. He tried to scream, but all that came out was a pathetic whimper. I slit his throat and put my face right up to his, in order to better see the light leave his eyes. And in that moment, looking into his eyes, I saw my destiny. A shoekeeper found the old tramp's body the next day. Apparently he went pale as a ghost upon finding it, according to the local newspaper. The police didn't suspect a thing either. They said it was a drug deal gone bad. And the rush I felt upon getting away with it was bliss. I laid low for years after that. Every night as I lay in bed, I would savor the memory of the last moment in his eyes. That moment where life became fragile and weak, until eventually succumbing to the embrace of nothingness. The bloodlust has always been with me. I don't think it will ever leave. I'm in my early 30s now, got a lovely wife and 2 beautiful children. My life couldn't be any happier, really. Only I get these lingering thoughts in my mind that will not go away. Thoughts no father or husband should have of his own family. I wonder what their insides would feel like, or what their eyes show me. Mr. Tickle Time. A creature visited me last night. Its face was blank, but for a blood-smeared mouth painted into the shape of a smile. It lingered at the bottom of my bed, watching me without eyes and hearing me without ears. The moment I laid eyes on it, it clapped its hands excitedly, standing barely illuminated by the moonlight that crept in through the window. And in that moment, when I was about to scream, it tickled my toes with a cold, bony finger and slowly progressed to the soles of my feet. Then I began laughing hysterically as the tickling intensified. Then, I was locked in a trance-like state as the creature began to tickle me all over, and my fears were all washed away. It got up into my face, and I could see the bloody smear around its mouth was fresh and glistening in the moonlight. It then began chomping its sharp and serrated teeth close to my face, producing a light clacking sound. Its breath was warm on my face as I stared at the space where no eye sat. Nothing but a blank page of skin. But even without eyes, I felt its gaze on me. I continued laughing uncontrollably as it tickled my belly button, bringing upon me a strange, almost unnatural sense of calm. Then it grabbed my hand in a firm grip with its bony hand as it continued to tickle me with its other. It licked my fingers with a long forked tongue. Then it began nibbling the end of my finger, and I could see blood beginning to trickle. But I just continued laughing, and when it bit my index finger off with one chomp, I didn't feel no pain. I only felt pleasure and laughter as it crunched my finger in its mouth, loudly munching bone and flesh. I was aware it was eating me, but I didn't care. The laughter blocked the pain, overwhelming me with happiness. So I just continued laughing, and it continued to eat me. After my fingers were gone, it ate my cheeks. All the while, its long, bony finger never stopped tickling as it wriggled about inside my belly button. And when it did stop tickling, I stopped laughing. The pain of my wounds now beginning to set in, and my eyes widened upon coming out of my hypnosis and seeing that completely blood-stained blank face right up in my own. I tried to scream, but it put its icy hand over my mouth and whispered to me,
"That's enough laughter for tonight,"
it said before it began stroking my forehead.
"Tomorrow night we shall play again."
Albert. His body is one big tumorous mass of flesh. 2 long antenna eyes protrude from the coagulation of bone, flesh, and gristle that all combine together into a ball of gore. His name is Albert, and he is my little brother. He was the result of a failed abortion. Mom tried killing him while he developed in the womb, but he didn't die, because 9 months later, he was born. He didn't emerge crying. No, he emerged hissing and shrieking as he fell out of my mother like jelly escaping through a hole. Mom had a look of both disgust and shock when she first saw Albert. She thought she had destroyed him using a coat hanger, and she was surprised to see his mangled form breathing and pulsating on the floor. She didn't pick him up. She just stared wide-eyed at the things she hadn't known had still been growing inside her. When I first saw Albert and looked into his long eyes that protruded high above the mass of flesh, I was won over instantly. Albert was my brother, and I would always love him. Mom threw Albert into the trash while he still lived. He shrieked loudly, desperate for love, but his pleas fell on deaf ears as Mom ignored him. She was waiting for him to die. Later that night, I went into the kitchen and scooped Albert out from the bin. His eyes moved around, observing me, before he let out a little gurgling sound. I took him up to my room and kept him hidden. The next day, Mom acted as if nothing had happened. She didn't even bother to check the bin. Albert was nothing but yesterday's trash. It seemed he was completely gone from her mind, or her mind was trying to block out all memories of her grotesque child. I managed to keep Albert a secret for over a year, until eventually he had grown too large to hide, and his appetite was even harder to satiate. Albert liked his food alive. He refused to eat anything that wasn't kicking. At first I fed him our neighbor's dog, Bruno. Then I took to hunting stray cats. Albert gobbled them all up whole, and then grew in size considerably. But then it got harder. I'd hunted every stray cat I could find, and the neighbors now kept their dogs inside ever since Bruno had gone missing. Now I had to rely on finding wild animals, which was hit or miss. Then it dawned on me. A food source that is easy to find and plentiful. I called my mother up to my room, and when she walked in and saw Albert, the son she had abandoned and forgotten, she screamed. Albert hissed, and with one swift shove, I pushed Mom into Albert's now gaping, toothless mouth. He then proceeded to eat her whole. It's been 30 years since that day, and Albert is still with me. And still hungry. The dead don't judge. I'm an odd man. Some even find me creepy. People cross the road to avoid me, and I often catch distrustful stares from passers-by on the street. I don't know what it is about me that people find so repulsive. Maybe it's because I like to go out at night, or it could be the scars that crisscross my entire face. I'm not entirely sure. This is why I love hanging around the local graveyard. No place more peaceful than among the deceased. There have been a lot of new bodies buried there recently too, thanks to our local serial killer. Police still have no idea who it is. Which I'm not going to complain about, of course. It's nice having an array of fresh bodies to talk to. Nice thing about freshly buried bodies is, it makes digging into the soil with my trusty shovel much easier. The moment I open the coffin for the first time is special. The aroma that escapes is something rather unique and splendid to the nostrils. Even better, when the bodies are bloated and full of gas. That really complements the decomposition perfectly. The newest arrival, Lucy was her name, smelled very nice due to her not being discovered for 2 weeks. And when they did crack the old metal bin open that had been roasting under the summer heat, her body had aged like a fine wine. The newspaper said the bystander who discovered the body threw up his entire Subway sandwich from the smell. It's an acquired smell, I suppose. one only the initiated can truly appreciate. Anyway, I cracked open her coffin last night. Her eyes had been eaten by maggots. They squirmed around inside her empty sockets as a worm wriggled out of her nostril and proceeded into her gaping mouth. And when I put my hand in hers, the skin felt wet, mushy, and began to disintegrate upon my touch. I found her rather beautiful in this state. Yes, she was a fine-looking woman when she was alive, but in death, she didn't fear me or tell me to go away, and she didn't threaten to call the police. Now she only listened. That special moment was soon broken, however, by a security guard approaching, with his torch shining on me, as I sat in the hole with my friend. But he got too close and didn't think to radio for backup. I guess he wanted to be some kind of hero? I like to sharpen my shovel just for occasions like these. I planted the sharpened edge straight into his throat. He dropped to the floor as he made a gurgling sound. I then threw him in the hole with Lucy. The dumb cunt is now Lucy's eternal companion 6 feet under. No one will ever find him. My secret is safe here among friends. Not a word will be said because the dead don't judge. They only listen.